Back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here, switching gears to the NHL, and we're bringing in our guy from FTN. You can catch him FTNDaily.com, FTNBets.com, FTNFantasy.com, on the Twitter machine, Russ Prentice. He is a Fantasy Hockey Writer of the Year winner from 2018. Russ, welcome in. I'm loving the hat, a Kraken hat off the get-go. What's going on, my man?
How's it going, Chris? Thanks for having me on.
Yes. Dude, you should be a lot more excited than that. Look at the hat you're rocking. Is it because Seattle just didn't pick the squad that you were hoping for them to pick? What I noticed, Russ, over the past couple of days, and a lot has happened in the NHL, and we're going to run through a lot of it here over the next three segments. Seattle was 100-1 like week and a half ago to win the Stanley Cup. They went to 50-1 roughly 24 hours before the expansion draft. Then they went to 40-1 the day of, and then after the expansion, they went to 55-1, and now they're roughly 50-1. So they've moved all over the place. FTNBets.com, our prop shop, has them at 55 over at Unibet, and then Points Bet, they have them at 40-1. Now, I don't think that they are a Stanley Cup contending team. It's a very weak division, but the team is starting to come together a little bit right now. What did you make of the expansion draft, and what do you make of their squad as of today?
Some of their picks were really puzzling to me. I mean, they almost just. I think what's becoming more clear is their intent was just to get to the salary cap floor and then get rid of some of those guys and start fresh with some new free agents and maybe moving forward in the draft or next year's free agency or not really sure what their intent was, but they clearly did not look like they had a plan to spend money this year to contend. And I mean, if that's their choice, that's great. But 55-1 is just, you're just throwing your money away.
a little bit, yeah. Shane Wright, maybe they're in on Shane Wright. I mean, I think a lot of teams are in on Shane Wright. Buffalo, they just got a goalie late last night in Craig Anderson. And then Arizona just seems to be taking on every single contract that they can take on. They have a boatload of picks here next season, and a lot of them in the second round, Russ.
There's a couple of big potential rookie stars coming in the next couple of years here. So there are a couple of teams I think that are going to make a run at winning the lottery. And I think Arizona is one of them for sure. Buffalo looks like to be a complete dumpster fire, especially if they get rid of Eichel. I just can't see them. I can't see them not being in the top three of the lottery next year.
We'll see where Eichel goes. I mean, you got to move him, I think, at some point, but not a lot of teams are in a position now to take on that cap. So I've ranked these players. Now, you can pick them apart if you want, and we could walk through this together, but let's bring up just the NHL free agency rankings. So just players who signed contracts with new teams. And I also have rankings a little bit later on for just players who were traded and also signed, like a Pavel Buchnevich. So up at the top, Dougie Hamilton. He was the big prize, defenseman for New Jersey, and it looks like the Devils' defense is starting to take shape here, decent, and probably going to get PK Subban off the books next year too to maybe make another splash next season. I have him up at the top. I think he's a top five, at least upside to be a top five fantasy hockey defenseman. Loves to shoot the puck and just gets a lot of ice time, power play, block shots, all that good stuff. Throws his body around too, as you know, Russ, playing in those banger leagues and high stakes leagues that you play in, points for hits and things like that. Zach Hyman, going from Toronto to Edmonton. I mean, good for this guy, right? I mean, he's going to play with studs. He played with studs in Toronto in Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, and now maybe potentially an opportunity to play with Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, one of the two, if not both, at times. Mike Hoffman to the Canadiens, Jayden Schwartz, one of the guys for Seattle, Blake Coleman to Calgary, Nick Foligno to Boston, Alexander Venberg also to Seattle from Florida, Philip Deneau, not a big offensive contributor, but he got paid 5.5 over 6 to the Kings. Pius Suter, I think, was a nice little sneaky pickup for Detroit. And then Michael Bunting, very high shooting percentage last year, very small sample size, but to the Leafs. So I'll be honest, Russ, there's a lot of names on here that I don't think I'll be interested from a fantasy hockey standpoint. I said it off the top. Sometimes in free agency, there's just average players and teams don't want to bring them back because of that. And also they don't want to pay what the demands are, and teams overpay in free agency. You know how it works. Other people know how it works as well. I mean, there was almost $800 million dished out over the past 24 hours, 566 in the first 6 hours of free agency. What did you make of this list, and who's appealing to you on it?
Overall, it's a pretty poor list. The majority of the studs re-signed with their existing teams, so there wasn't a lot of big names changing cities, but I think you nailed on the head. Dougie Hamilton was the big name to change. I wonder how effective he's going to be playing with a lesser, younger team in New Jersey, but they do have some offensive talent that's developing there, and he's going to step in and probably immediately be the leader of that young team. I think Carolina had a lot more talent to work with that was supporting him, especially on the power play. They were one of the more deadly power play teams in the league. I think Hyman is the clear number 2. I think he had some physicality to Edmonton, which they desperately needed in the forward spots. He'll do well, I think, playing alongside the 2 big guys there. But like you said, he was playing alongside 2 big guys in Toronto as well, and overall his numbers aren't spectacular, but he does more on the defensive end than most people realize, and that doesn't necessarily show up in the fantasy box scores on a daily basis for most leagues. I think you got the 1, 2, 3. I think are correct. I think Hoffman's probably the next guy too, and I think he's a great fit in Montreal, which is clearly a defensive-minded team, and he adds a little bit more offense for them. And I don't think he was a great fit in St. Louis. St. Louis kind of had guys that could score when they were healthy. And he just kind of got lost in the shuffle, kept moving around the second, third lines and first and second power plays, and just never really got into a groove there. But I think in Montreal, he'll take a spot on the top power play unit and be one of those top 6 forwards for them. Add some offense. So.
Yeah, for Hoffman, I agree. It didn't seem like there was a connection there in St. Louis, but according to reports, they wanted to bring him back. Now they're trying to flip Tarasenko, and that's just a whole nother conversation. But it is what it is for Hoffman. He's a goal scorer, right? I don't love him as a player, honestly. Like everyone knows, I follow the Canadians, and I don't love him as a player. I think even the off-ice and locker room stuff, I don't even care about much of that. According to reports out of Florida and St. Louis, he was fine. Obviously had his issues in Ottawa. But he's a goal scorer, 20-plus goals in 6 straight seasons and 17 and 52 last year. So he was right on his pace. You mentioned he's going to help out the power play. I wonder where he's going to fit in. Like he needs a centerman to give him the puck. And I don't know if he'll play with Suzuki, but right now they just have a lot of right-handed shots in the top 9 in Montreal, like Toffoli and Caulfield and Gallagher, Armia, Anderson. Like they needed some left-handed shot. So he should, if he's not so much of a defensive liability, Russ, he probably will play in a top 6 and likely on that first power play to help them out. And that's where Montreal needed the most. So I like that call. I like actually that you have backed up my call of having him in the top 3. Jayden Schwartz is interesting as well. Like this is a guy who's a proven 20-goal scorer. He's done it before in spurts, and now he's going to get a real opportunity. But I feel like it's almost a loss, like just moving from St. Louis to Seattle, that I feel like it's maybe a bit of a downtick. But all these guys, I don't think I'll have a lot of fantasy, interest in them. Maybe Michael Bunting. I would imagine, Russ, that Bunting is a guy that you will probably write up over at FTNDaily.com, your amazing cheat sheets, as a guy who's probably going to be priced very low, almost min maybe to start. Maybe not because he's going to be a member of the Leafs and everything.
Who he plays with, yeah.
Yeah, but if he does get a role, they're very thin on the left side, losing Hyman. If he does get a role maybe alongside Tavares or alongside Matthews, he could be certainly interesting as well. And then what do you think about Blake Coleman before we finish up this convo here? Blake Coleman to the Flames. In New Jersey, he was solid. There was his last year in Jersey, Russ, there were 3 players with over 20 goals, 200 shots, and 200 hits. He was one. The other 2 are Ovechkin and Josh Anderson. Yeah. He's probably going to get more ice time in Calgary than he got in Tampa Bay.
He's in a similar position, at least on the offensive side, as Hoffman. Calgary was a low-scoring, kind of grinded-out team, and Coleman instantaneously brings a little more offense to that lineup. But he does have a little more defensive prowess than Hoffman, too, with the hits, obviously, you just mentioned. But Calgary was it seemed at times like they were just a terrible, terrible team. But then you go look at their box scores, and they were on like a 7 out of 10 game winning streak, and you just like it just didn't seem like they were playing as well as they were playing. And I think he's a good add to give them some offensive depth there, which they desperately needed. They have some decent players and names, but they're getting kind of up in age, and he kind of adds to that young second and third lines that they have there. He can kind of bring a little more oomph to the offensive end of the ice for them. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, he said Sutter was his kind of coach, and he's probably, for Sutter, his kind of player, right, who can add a little bit of sandpaper. You're right. There's not a lot of offense in Calgary. They were a very boring hockey team to watch last year. There's no question. And it could be like the last go for Monahan and Goudreau. Who knows if they're even going to be on the team before the season does start. We could see a trade. So that's it from the top 10. Again, Philip Deneau is not going to offer you a whole lot. Benberg got an opportunity to play with studs in Florida. I don't think he's going to offer a whole lot. Foligno in a bangers league potentially at times if he's playing in a top 6 in Boston, but I don't think he'll offer a whole lot either. But I think Bunting is interesting. And then a notable was Ryan Suter. I like the pickup to Dallas, but also probably not going to get a lot of power play time there. They have other studs, right, that they can roll out there like Klingberg and Heiskanen.
He kind of fills in for Alexiak, who went to Seattle as well.
And I'd like Alexiak in Seattle, actually.
I do too. I think
yeah.
It's a really good pick.
All right, we're going to keep the hockey talk going. We're going to talk about goalies. There were a ton of them that moved around. I have top 10, but there are honestly like 15 that have moved around here over the past week or so. So the hockey conversation continues here on Game Plus Network. Don't go anywhere. And Russ, there were a lot of goalies who moved around. Actually, over the past couple of years, there have been a lot of goalies who have moved around, like 20 plus easily. So up at the top, I got Darcy Kemper here. So Colorado just couldn't make it work with Philip Grubauer. Joe Sakic didn't want to pay up for Grubauer, who goes to the Kraken. 2 Vezina nominees, Fleury, the winner, not signed or anywhere, but traded to Chicago. So a lot of movement here in between the pipes. And as you see, Kemper up at the top, Grubauer, Linus Ullmark, who I think is interesting. Fleury to Chicago, as I mentioned. Who knows if he's going to play? There's reports that he could retire. Peter Mrazek, Frederik Andersen. So those guys just switch. And you wonder, too, like with the trades, oh, my goodness, we can get into this. Alex Nedeljkovic, I'm getting excited. Detroit, Braden Holtby, Dallas, Halak, Vancouver, Antti Ranta. So those guys, whatever, at the end, it doesn't really matter. But Carolina, like not dishing out the money for Hamilton is one thing. Okay, fine. You don't want to do it. Yeah. But trading Nedeljkovic, who was amazing, who led them to a division title, who was fine against Tampa. Yeah, he let in a couple softies, but it really wasn't on him the reason they lost. They were in those games that they lost against the eventual Stanley Cup champs. So you trade a third and you don't want to sign him to 3 or 3.5, which he gets in Detroit. And then you get Bernier in return. You apparently, according to reports, you were only offering like 1.5. You could have just, and I mean, if you're Toronto, you could have just been like, can we get Nedeljkovic? Like, do you want Frederik Andersen? Is there a trade rights here? I mean, can we just swap rights for Mrazek and Andersen who just switch? A whole lot of just randomness. But man, I just thought, looking at this list, and I have Nedeljkovic at 7, maybe that's low. I don't know. Detroit did some good things, and I think they're on the rise. I trust Steve Yzerman in like a dynasty setting. I would be into getting Nedeljkovic if you could get him from somewhere. And maybe an owner's like, Detroit. He's leaving Carolina, going to Detroit. I don't want this guy. Like, I think he's a really good goalie. What did you make of Carolina moving him?
All the things that Seattle did that were puzzling. The most puzzling move of the entire offseason so far has been the Nedeljkovic trade. We questioned this at the time, and it's looked even worse after Carolina letting Bernier walk too. It doesn't make any sense what they were doing. I mean, okay, yeah, they got a 3rd round pick, but you're talking about a 24-year-old goalie who was fantastic in the regular season and got them to the 2nd round again, and they ran into Tampa, who people have varying opinions on how fair their roster was in the playoffs, but that's a different story for a different day. I just don't get it. How do you give up on a guy like that? I mean, you might have a future Vezina winner in there, and you just gave him up for a 3rd round pick. I just don't get it. It didn't make any sense to me. And then to turn around and give Frederik Andersen, who has looked awful in the last year and a half to me, give him $4.5 million a year. I
Puzzling.
just didn't get it. I don't get it. Of all the things that have been puzzling so far, that one is way at the top of the list.
Yeah, that one I don't get it either. And they asked Steve Yzerman, and he's like, "Listen, you're gonna have to ask Carolina why they parted with Nedeljkovic." So good on Yzerman, and he did it in Tampa, and he's doing it here in Detroit. He seems to know a thing or two. But Darcy Kemper up at the top. I don't know where I'm gonna have this guy ranked overall in my rankings, and they still have Pavel Francouz, who I do like actually. He just was bothered by injuries last season. I think it could be maybe a 1-2 punch. Maybe it's Kemper 60-40, but also something needs to be said about Darcy Kemper, who has put up really good numbers over the past couple of seasons, Russ, as you know this. I mean, I know how many times you have written him up as a member of Arizona. I mean, not a great defense and seeing a lot of rubber. Now he goes to Colorado, one of the stingiest teams in the entire league in terms of just allowing quality chances. Not a lot last year. Like, no disrespect to Grubauer. He was strong. He was fine. But Colorado was one of the best defensive teams in hockey at 5-on-5 as well. It was a lot to give up a first and Timmins to get Kemper. Now, they were put in a tough spot, but Kemper has put up some pretty solid numbers. I mean, this past year, 907 save percentage, 928, 925. So the last 3 years have been solid, but only one season on his NHL resume with over 31 games. So he doesn't have the best track record either. But are you going to be interested in him from a fantasy standpoint, knowing that he is a member of the Avs and how good they are?
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 with him because, like you said, Colorado's defense is way better. I mean, I'd expect his goals against to go down, his wins to go up, but I've been a huge proponent of talking about saves in fantasy, and especially in daily fantasy. You want those big save totals, and I just recall game after game after game of Grubauer where they would win games 3-1, 4-2, and you look at the stat sheet and Grubauer would have 17 saves. And it's just like, well, I mean, maybe I could go out there and do well for Colorado. So, like you said, I do like Kemper. I think he's actually been a pretty solid goaltender for Arizona over the last couple of years. And maybe with the good defense in Colorado, he'll turn into more of a wins, low save, decent fantasy option. But I think it changes his game quite a bit. He could turn into a pretty quality goaltender for Colorado.
As you're talking about that, I'm thinking as well, like, this is a guy who's going to be priced up in daily. You're going to have to probably spend high draft capital because he is a member of Colorado. And if you are playing in points league with saves, he's not going to get a lot of them. That's just the way that the Avs are. They're built very strong at 5-on-5. So it's a really good point. And Grubauer, it'll be interesting to see what he can do with Seattle. I actually like their decor. We talked about Alexiak, Giordano. They got some guys there that can play defense pretty well. Allmark may be the guy, and I was having this conversation with a buddy before I came on. I just gave him these rankings. I wanted to see him rip them apart, and I was hoping you would rip them apart a little bit more. Allmark you could maybe make a case for him number one, right? Why not? He had a 917 save percentage with the Sabres last season.
He's very similar to Kemper to me. It was playing on a terrible team, the terrible defense, and is very talented when he in save totals. Now he's going to a Boston team that does not allow a lot of shots, and he's gonna likely move up that salary list. And like Kemper, those are the type of guys that I didn't mind paying 7.3 to 7.5 for on DraftKings, and now they're going to be 8 to 8.3 on a nightly basis, especially when they play a good matchup for them. I'm interested to see in how the shift in game styles play out for those two guys, because their save totals are going to go way down, but their winning percentages are probably going to go way up. So it's a trade-off, and I don't like paying for the wins in DraftKings because the saves are such a huge component of your scores. I think they'll both be much better plays on like a FanDuel setting where the win is a lot higher weighted in the scoring system. But we'll see. I mean, maybe early on in the season they won't be super expensive and they might be decent plays, but I think it's going to catch up with them when they're winning at a 60% clip instead of a 35% clip.
it'll be interesting to see the Bruins, right? The change in guard. I mean, Halak is gone here to Vancouver. He's not totally interesting from a fantasy standpoint. But Tuukka Rask, who just had hip surgery, I believe, and is going to be sidelined until at least January. He's a UFA, not even currently a member of any hockey team. And before we get out of here, I kind of like Braden Holtby in Dallas. I just feel like I just like that team defensively, where it's a good landing spot for him just to split some time. And I think, just getting away from Vancouver, I know Thatcher Demko did good at moments with the Canucks, but a leaky defense, I think he's going to be in a position to succeed. And that's nice bounce back and low cost, a nice buy low guy there in Braden Holtby to the Stars. We'll talk more hockey here, get into some sexier names like Sam Reinhart, Pavel Buchnevich. We'll talk about some players who were traded over the past week or so. It's just old faces in new places, like to say here. So keep her locked. Don't go anywhere. Mean Streets continues on Game Plus Network. You're watching Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here with Russ Prentice. We are still talking NHL. That's right. Just a couple minutes left here with Russ, and just going to bring up my NHL offseason trade rankings. So some of these guys were traded and signed, like Pavel Buchnevich, as you see at number 2. Sam Reinhart was just flipped as Buffalo is in full sell mode to the Panthers. Seth Jones traded and then signed to the Blackhawks. Ryan Ellis traded to Philadelphia. I think that's a fantastic get for the Flyers to be on PP1. And Cam Atkinson and Jacob Voracek flipped. Voracek is back in Columbus. Not totally interested. Again, he's just on this list because he was flipped. He's a pass-first guy. I don't really care about those type of guys in fantasy hockey unless they're absolute studs. Connor Garland to Vancouver. Evgeny Dadonov is interesting. Flip from Ottawa to Vegas. I don't know if he's going to have a top 6 role or not. We'll see if Riley Smith or Jonathan Marchessault get moved, but a decent ad, even though he had a down year last year. Victor Arvidsson to LA, and then Tyler Johnson to Chicago as part of just like a salary. Brent Seabrook going the other way, and of course placed on long-term IR for Tampa. Sam Reinhart, you agree with the ranking number 1? I think this is a fantastic spot for him in Florida. I'm just digging what the Panthers have on offense.
He's probably been one of the more underrated guys in the league, who's being stuck up there in Buffalo. I mean, he's benefited from playing with Eichel, but once Eichel was out, I mean, it was pretty much a lost season for them. I mean, he's a former top 3 pick in the draft, and is should flourish playing in a more wide open offense for Florida with the really talented top 6 they have on offense. So yeah, I think that's a really good get for Florida.
Yeah, at least 17 goals in every season, 20 plus in 5 of 6 and 25 last season. What did you make of Ryan Ellis to Philadelphia?
I like that pickup. It was kind of a lucky situation for Philly, and they were the ones that got in on it when Nashville couldn't protect everyone in the expansion draft. And they were one of the only 3 teams to use the 8 skater option, so they could protect all their defensive depth. And even with that, they felt the need to get rid of Ellis to protect some other younger guys. So Philly swooped in and picked up a really quality player who's looked really good when some of their other guys have been out. I mean, he's a very talented offensive defenseman. So I think that was a really good get for Philly.
And Buchnevich, I mean, going from New York to St. Louis, I kind of feel like maybe his stock goes down slightly. He's still going to play with really good players in St. Louis. It's going to be a good power play. But at times, man, he was playing with Panarin and Zibanejad. So, I mean, those are really 2 strong forwards. So, and I think I like Seth Jones, too. I mean, the guy's going to log a lot of ice time. It looks like Jonathan Taves will be back there. Kirby Dach, a full season of him, hopefully healthy. Patrick Kane to Brinkat, if he's going to be on PP1. He could be decent. And then Atkinson depends on where he's going to go. If he's going to play with Couturier or if he's going to play with Kevin Hayes, he's a volume shooter. He could be okay as well. Russ, we got to get out of here. Unfortunately, man, I really appreciate it. We'll have you on again when we get closer to the hockey season. It's going to be a shorter off season too. So we'll catch up with you soon. We'll talk some rankings and your draft strategy because you are a phenomenal player in high stakes leagues. So I appreciate your time. I'm digging the hat. I'm also in need of a Seattle Kraken hat. I like that anchor. I got to get one for sure. Russ Prentice on Twitter. Check out all of his work over at FTN. I got some